Hey guys, I am recording this at night during a thunderstorm, so if you hear thunder, that's what that is. But I wanted to go ahead and knock out this announcement video so that I could have it out for 8/15, as in August 15th. Starting on September 22nd, which is the 20th anniversary of Lost's pilot, my co-host and I will be releasing a new Lost podcast. I'm not going to say anything about my co-host in this video because we are going to release an introduction episode to the podcast between now and September 22nd. You will see that episode go up as a video on this channel, at which point our podcast will be available on all of your typical podcasting platforms. And from that point on, you'll be able to listen to each new episode on whichever platform you prefer, or view the video versions on this channel. The one thing I will say now about my co-host is that he is someone who watched the show back when it aired, but he has not rewatched it since. And it is my understanding that he remembers very little of it. And so this podcast will feature two types of episodes. The first set will feature both my co-host and I, and in these episodes we do not plan on getting into spoilers for episodes beyond the one that we are talking about. The second set of episodes will be much more in line with the going back follow-up series of videos I do on this channel, where it's just me discussing my thoughts of each specific episode in the larger context of the show as a whole. Each episode where it's the two of us will be released on the 20th anniversary of the Lost episode that we're discussing. So for example, on September 22nd, we will release a podcast episode talking about Pilot Part 1. Then a few days after that, another episode will be released where it's just me and I'm talking about Pilot Part 1 in the context of the completed series. Then on September 29th, we will talk about Pilot Part 2. A few days after that, it will be just me talking in more spoilery detail about Pilot Part 2, and so on and so forth. Now, because you guys have always been really good at providing insights that are worth addressing, what I would really like is if you guys would send in emails to dr.candlepun@gmail.com that we can address on the podcast. These can be anything from you sharing your experience watching the show back in the day, things you remember from when you watched each specific episode, theories or interpretations you had at the time, or just things that you think are worth us discussing. By no means do you guys have to censor spoilers in these emails. I will be the one going through them, and I will address the more spoilery ones in the episodes where it's just me by myself. Now, these podcast episodes will be recorded well in advance of them being released. So what I am going to do is post on the community tab of this channel, letting you guys know when we're about to record for each specific episode. And that'll give you guys the opportunity to either leave a comment on that post or make sure you get your email sent in. Now, along with that email address, I have also set up a Ko-fi and a Patreon for this podcast. On Ko-fi, anyone can donate any amount of money, and they can make that a one-time donation or a monthly recurring donation. Patreon, on the other hand, does not allow donors to specify their amounts, and instead of setting up a bunch of tiers, I just made one $5 tier on Patreon. Now, anyone that donates any amount of money, even just once, will get their own candidate name and number added to my cave wall. This will then be displayed in every video version of the podcast going forward from that point, as well as every theory and analysis video that I release on this channel. The candidate number, which I can either randomly assign to you or you can select yourself, so long as it hasn't already been assigned to somebody else, will then be yours and only yours forever. This means even when you're no longer donating, you will continue to be displayed on that wall in every video going forward, and no one else will ever take that candidate number from you. Now, the other thing that a donation gets you, so long as you are an active donor, is a vocal credit in every podcast episode that is released while you are still an active donor. The order in which these names will be read out will be from the highest level of recent donations to the lowest. To be honest, I'm not a fan of excluding people from exclusive content simply because they haven't donated enough. And that is why I prefer doing it this way, where the highest donors get credited first, but no one that donates anything will be excluded. So if you guys feel like signing up and helping us out in that way, you can go to ko-fi.com/candlepun or patreon.com/candlepun. Now, for the handful of you that are current Patreon supporters of mine on my original Patreon account, which is The Youth Truth, you guys don't have to change anything. You guys are obviously already on the candidate wall and will continue to be, and you guys will be credited in the podcast episodes in the order of the tier levels you guys are at. Now, that said, if you guys felt like switching over to the Candlepun Patreon, I wouldn't mind eventually repurposing that original Patreon for the new YouTube channel that I have recently started. If you've been following this channel for some time, then you know I have expressed interest in discussing other topics besides Lost, but since presumably everybody that is subscribed here has done so specifically for the Lost content, it has always felt like people would be disappointed if I posted non-Lost content on this channel. And then after I rebranded the channel last year, so that people would know immediately what this channel is about, from that point on, it has seemed even more inappropriate for me to post anything that's not related to Lost. And so for that reason, I have launched a separate channel called The Youth Truth, on which I can talk about whatever I feel like, but will undoubtedly most of the time be some film or television show. In fact, I have already released 2 videos on that channel talking about the most recent season of House of the Dragon. So if there's anybody that's a fan of that show and feels like hearing me talk about it, please do check those out. For everyone else, if you find my ramblings at all amusing, even if they're about other shows or movies besides Lost, then please do go subscribe to that channel. The idea of starting a channel from scratch and having to build up subscribers from the beginning is a pretty daunting one. So if you guys would be willing to help me build that channel and start it growing by going over there and subscribing to that channel as well, it really would mean a lot to me. Like I said before, we will be releasing that introduction episode between now and September 22nd. The other thing that you can expect to see between now and September 22nd is the video that I mentioned I was going to do in my last Going Back entry, which will be me talking about my perspective on the bigger picture of what Lost is about. As far as my traditional theory and analysis videos, I promise you guys those aren't going to stop. Since each of our podcast episodes will be releasing on the 20th anniversary of each respective Lost episode, that means there will be weeks where there will not be a new podcast episode. And indeed, there will be months between each season in which the podcast will be on hiatus, just as the show was back in the day. And so it is during those times that I plan on releasing my more traditional videos. Hey guys, I am adding this in at the last minute. So last night, as I got ready to upload this video, I went to publish the Patreon page, and immediately after doing so, the page was deactivated due to, quote, suspicious activity. From looking online, this is apparently something that happens with Patreon sometimes. And it sounds like, after contacting support, that it is something that they are able to resolve. So I've been waiting around all day hoping to hear back from them before actually releasing this video. But we're reaching the point where I'm not willing to delay it any further. So if you're watching this video and this section of audio is in it, then that means at the time the video is being uploaded, the Patreon is not yet active, but that it should and hopefully will be in the near future. With that said, this is a good opportunity to endorse Ko-fi over Patreon, given this situation and the fact that Ko-fi allows donors to specify any dollar amount starting at $1. Plus, Ko-fi has an option for creators where they will not take a cut of the donations from us, whereas Patreon does not have that option. So if you're inclined to support the podcast with a donation, I would encourage you to use Ko-fi. But if you already have a Patreon account and would rather just donate there, please feel free to keep checking that link to see when it goes active. Both the Ko-fi and Patreon links will be in the description to this video, as well as on the main channel page. But okay, I think that's everything I wanted to say in this video. As always, I hope you guys come back for the next one, and I hope you'll join us for the podcast. To like this video, click the thumbs up. Or, if there has been an incursion by the hostiles, click the thumbs down. To leave feedback, enter a comment below. To be notified when more videos arrive, click the circle and then select the notification bell. To view previous content from this channel, click either of the two boxes.